Ari Rosenbaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about top 10 signs you have an unhealthy 401k plan for our plan sponsors in the audience. Of course, first things first, go to that 401ksite.com for further information on all our events. We got Milwaukee up on the tab, September the 5th, Friday, American Family Field. Also, within a couple weeks, we should have a date solidified for that National 4K virtual conference. And of course, Full Circle available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon.com. Fun book. Well, not a fun book, reliving all those memories, but kind of, discussions on life and business and kind of the lessons that I learned. And if you check YouTube, the YouTube channel, we have the video from the webinar where I talk about the book and lessons that you can learn from the book as it pertains to 401k plan. Because about 2/3 of the book is about business, my business experience. Only 1/3 is about my traumatic childhood and dysfunctional family. So 2/3 is, about my dysfunctional career prior to starting my own firm in 2010. Just trying to recover from this past weekend. My son came back from Israel. He was going on Project Birthright, and all of a sudden there was a war that started during it. He had to go through Cyprus and take a plane from Cyprus. He took a boat to Cyprus, went from Cyprus to Milan, and then a plane ride home. And then the next day, we went to Fanatics Fest, Friday and Saturday. And that was just interesting. My son is more concerned about missing Fan Fest, the Fanatics Fest, than he was about ballistic missiles and being in a safe room. That's just the nature of him. And it was a fun weekend, just very, very busy. Going to the city, I went to the Javits Center for the first time since the 1997 July New York State bar exam, and met Peyton, Eli Manning, Dan Marino, Kevin Costner, Emmett Smith, a whole bunch of people, Yammer Yager and Matt Rempe and quite a few people. Carlos Mendoza, my son's favorite manager. It was an exhausting weekend. You're trying to recover, and it's just like you got so much to do. But here we are, because like I said, it's about almost 7 years that I've done this podcast, which is just crazy to think about it. But let's get to again. Really, again, last week we did a top 10 list. I've always found these kind of ideas fun because it's easy to talk to plan sponsors, but I grew up in the 1970s, 1980s. People drank a lot. They smoked a lot. It's always funny to go see my buddy's Twitter handle, Super 70 Sports, and see, the pictures of the smoking trays at Burger King. And the local pizzeria around the corner had a cigarette machine where you just pull the tabs and all that stuff. But, I think people these days take a lot better care of themselves. I've noticed how alcoholic consumption of hard alcohol has come down. But, plan sponsors really should treat their plan kind of like they treat their body. Take care of all these little things and not forget about symptoms. You identify symptoms, there could be something obviously wrong or something worse than what you thought. You know, I've seen too many sick plans out there, handled quite a few sick plans. And there's really like a list of things that obviously can show you that things are amiss. And obviously number one on my hit list is late deposit of, salary deferrals. The DOL doesn't play around with late deferrals. The rule is simple. Employee contributions have to be deposited as soon as possible. Back in the old days, when everything was done by check, done by mail, before, ACH, internet, all that kind of stuff, yeah, we had the 15th day of the following month. And obviously that changed. You can't hold it on for more than a few years. And again, like I said, for more than a few days. And like I always say, that's the most significant, most common plan error. And if you answer yes that you had late deposits on your 5500, expect a letter at some point from the Department of Labor that they don't have an application for you for correcting this matter. You don't want to be on the Department of Labor's radar. I'm afraid of heights and afraid of roller coasters, and I'm afraid of DOL audits. That's really my fears. And I think that having that late deposit style deferrals is an unnecessary blemish. And, again, I've always said a plan sponsor never makes that mistake once. It's multiple times. Next on the hit list, low average account balances. If you have a plan that's been around for years and average participant balances are really low, it's not just about salary levels. It's a sign that your employees aren't really engaged with your plan, and that's a problem. Maybe there's something wrong with the education piece of it. Maybe there's no default contribution, whatever it is. Maybe the plan design's not working anymore, and it doesn't get people to save. And whatever the cause, it's to me a red flag and a missed opportunity to help your employees have a good retirement. Next on the hit list, number 3, no ERISA bond in place. It's one of the easiest problems to fix. Yet, ERISA requires every plan that has employees to have a fidelity bond in place that protects the plan from fraud or dishonesty. Again, you say on your 5500 you don't have a bond, well, then you got a problem. The Department of Labor checks for that. That's another way to get an audit. I don't like that. Number 4, low deferral participation rate. When only a few employees are deferring into the plan, it tells to me a story. It's not a great one. Maybe the enrollment process is too passive. Maybe a plan feels too complex or irrelevant to their day-to-day lives. Whatever the reason is, low participation rate is a clear sign that something's broken in your communication, your culture, or your plan design. There's ways to fix it. You could use auto-enrollment, automatic escalation, well-structured match. Maybe it's the education piece. Maybe you're not having an advisor that's helping participants out, and they're, don't want to invest because they're overwhelmed with the information that's out there. Number 5, compliance testing failures and corrective contributions. There are plans out there that consistently fail the ADP and ACP testing year after year. They're forced to issue refunds to HCEs, and it's frustrating, but it could be fixed. It could be fixed through Safe Harbor. It could be fixed through autumn enrollment. Maybe there's a communication piece that it could do a better job in letting the lower end people to defer more. You have to acknowledge that it's a failure and do something about it. And again, I've always told the story. Years ago, I had a client. They were in the marketing business. They produced the toys not for Happy Meals, but for the competitors. Like apparently, like Subway and other companies had. The thing about Subway, if you give me a choice of eating Subway or not eating, I'm always going to pick not eating. But apparently, there's a kids meal at Subway. I think they were also doing Wendy's or whatever it was. So back in the day before I had kids, I would actually go over there and bring some toys for my niece and nephew. And what happened with that plan was they were consistently failing the ADP test. And they were using one of the payroll providers. And the payroll provider never bothered to talk to them about Safe Harbor plan design. But more importantly, in the compliance testing, the owner of the company had to give up, $11,000 as a refund for, back in those days, it was a lower deferral limit. I think it was maybe 12 or whatever it was. So about 90% of her money had to get refunded that she deferred. Nobody at the payroll provider told her that if she merely put in a $7,000 QNEC, she could avoid that refund. So she made that QNEC, the refunds were avoided, and then I had a client as a result of that. And If there's a TPA out there that's not communicating to a plan sponsor that something's amiss, you really shouldn't be failing the discrimination testing. Let's see what we can do. But there's sometimes you can't do anything. Listen, you work in a restaurant business, and people aren't deferring. There's a point where you can't do anything about it. But maybe you do safe harbor. Whatever it is, maybe you do automatic. Whatever it is, at least it's a conversation starter. And that's important. Communication is key. Number 6, too many hardship requests. Life doesn't go to plan. Life throws curveballs, and hardships happen. But if there's a consistent stream of hardship withdrawals, it could be a sign of deeper issues. Maybe your workforce is struggling financially. Obviously, during times when the market's down or the economy's bad, people will tap their 401k plan. Whatever it is, it's got to be fixed. Maybe the hardship standards are too loose. Whatever it is, too many hardship requests, in my mind, suggest that the plan isn't functioning well as a long-term savings vehicle, which, again, that was the whole point of the plan. Number 7, too many defaulted loans. Plan loans, I'm not a fan of, because there are mistakes that come with it. That's why I only allow one plan loan outstanding at a time. On the administrative side, they require careful tracking, timely repayments, and real administrative attention. I have participants defaulting. I have plan sponsors goofing and having the participants default because they didn't get in that quarterly payment. But when participants do default, it creates a tax mess for them and a fiduciary problem for you. Obviously, I self-correct if the fault is on the plan side. I don't want to punish plan participants, so I'll re-amortize the loan and try to self-correct it. But if they are defaulting, it may be a concern that maybe they should tighten their loan policy. One loan outstanding at a time. If you have I used to work with companies, had 8 or 9 loans. This isn't a payday loan center. If you have too many defaulted loans, like I said, limit the amount of loans, increase the loan minimum amount, and maybe have an education piece to plan participants talking about the negative aspects of borrowing money from the plan and the tax implications of a defaulted loan. 8, no benchmarking the fees. We live in a day. It's going to be 13 years since fee disclosure. The days when plan fiduciaries had the fiduciary responsibility to pay only reasonable plan expenses, and yet they didn't know how much was being charged because their TPA didn't have to tell them, which is, again, it to me, that still never made any sense to me. In 2010, I was calling for fee disclosure. It reminds me of the movie Casino, where they don't allow the owners of the casino in the count room. It makes no sense. So it allows the employees over there to bleed money. Take a couple bucks here and there. Have their beak wet. And we've come far from that. We have fee disclosure, but yet we still have plan sponsors out there that don't benchmark their fees. There's that line in the movie Caddyshack, Ty Webb, where he doesn't keep score, and Judge Schmel says, how do you measure yourself against other golfers? And Ty Webb's like, by height. You don't know how much you're paying until you see what else is out there in the marketplace. And again, my wife liked these contractors. I actually didn't like them from day one. And of course, my wife said, well, why didn't you speak up? And, until we had to throw them off a job right after the hurricane, we didn't know how much, that they were more than other people. Their quote to clean up the house where they weren't even going to paint was just ridiculous. And that's when we learned that they were more expensive than anybody else. And that's on us. But when you're a plan fiduciary and you're having participants pay for it, that's unforgivable. And that's where you could line into trouble. You don't have to pick the cheapest provider out there, but you need to know what you're paying and why. you know, Jerry Schlichters of the world and the budget Jerry Schlichters of the world, they pick on plan sponsors. They're paying too much in fees. It's low-hanging fruit for them. It's easy. They look for a quick settlement and they move on. So that's why it's important for plan sponsors to always benchmark their fees. Number 9, no review of plan providers. I heard loyalty is a good thing. You know, I used my same mechanic for the last 27 years. But, you know, that's on me. That's probably my car or whatever. I have a loyalty, but I don't have a blind loyalty to Ralph. Just because you use a certain TPA, record keeper, or advisor for the past decade, it doesn't mean that they're still the right fit. Plans evolve. Providers evolve, both positively and negatively. You need to make sure that the plan providers do their job. I've seen, instances where the plan sponsor had too much loyalty to the plan provider and just let things slide. And in one case, like I always said, to the point where the Department of Labor sued this woman for $3 million. And it turned out there were no valuations done to back up her claims that she was entitled to this benefit. So the Department of Labor thought that she was stealing money from her own plan, embezzling. That's a problem. So, not only do you have to benchmark your fees, you got to make sure, listen, the plan provider is doing their job. Ed Koch was mayor of New York City 12 years. And he always said, how am I doing? How am I doing? And that's the same thing about plan providers. You have to know how they are doing. And when they're not doing well, got to get rid of them. You're hired to be fired. Last but not least, not having a formal fiduciary process in place. If you don't have a clear process in place for overseeing the plan, reviewing investments, and documenting decisions, you're walking a tightrope without a net. You need a formal fiduciary process. It's not just best practice. It's really, as a plan sponsor, your legal defense if something goes incredibly wrong. That means regular meetings, written minutes, investment policy statements, and a documented rationale for your decisions. Without that, you're just winging it. And you can't wing ERISA. You can't dabble in it, and you can't wing it. You have to be up to snuff. And, that's a really tall task. And like I said, this is just like a hit list of, signs that the plan is not running up to snuff. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of That 401k podcast. Of course, go to that401ksite.com for further information on the Milwaukee event. Go to Amazon.com. We got a book out, Full Circle, about life and business, the lessons I've learned. Every chapter is like a saying, a belief that I have, a mantra. Check it out. I think it's $10 on Kindle and about $12 in paperback. And check out the video me talking about the book on YouTube. And that's it, really, for another episode of That 401k podcast. Please tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of That 401k podcast. Take care. Bye.